I am the founder and coach and chair of Kuji Chakalia and the Juneteenth celebration here in Madison. Uh, and I also am very involved with doing things in our community. And so Healing Labs is an initiative that Kuji started with partners, the library, the school district, and the UW School of Medicine, School of Public Health, and the Collaborative Center for Health Equity, and all of us. And so we have all these partners who are coming together to present an opportunity to do look at ways of healing in terms of equitable healing, in terms of social healing, in terms of mental and physical healing. And we are working with the school district to bring these programs into the schools. And we initiated this back in February, and we are in the pregnancy stage where things are developing. And there has been some Braxton Hicks birthing pains where we can see things that are working well, things that we need to reconsider. And today there's hopefully two of our community folks who I've watched exemplify our mantra. Who am I? And I am. And one of the things that when we talk about who am I, we talk about like myself. I'm a teen mom. I am a survivor of incest and childhood sexual abuse, domestic violence, and I'm a recovering substance abuser. And so, but today I am a leader in my community. I am a mother. I am a grandmother. I am a nana. I am upper middle class, if you believe it or not. And so those are the things that resilience and healing has allowed and afforded me. So when I identify people in my community, I watch people. I'm a people watcher. And one of our presenters is Miss Sabrina. And when she first came to Madison, I met her at our bar, spoken word artist. But then I watched this woman just take hold and take this city by storm, start advocating for women, particularly Black women, made the list of Essence magazines of like we have them, one of the 51 most influential. She was in a national. And so she can tell you a little bit about who am I? And I am, and some of the pathways, because sometimes we deal with social workers and folks who are outside of our community who really don't know the value of resilience and the value of a connection, the value of faith, the value of having those interconnective kinds of extended family and supports. So I'm going to welcome y'all to this presentation, and then Sabrina is going to take off. And if our other presenter doesn't come, we'll have some good conversation, because I think we have some of our project members online, so that we can talk a little bit more about that. But I really want Sabrina to do her thing. I wish she would start off with a spoken word, but and just and just spit a couple lines for us. Y'all know, when you spoken word, when people say you're ready, it's kind of like Black church. They say you're ready in season and out of season, because you never know when you're going to get called. But I really wanted to just talk about her who am I and I am, and where things like what was the some of us take the straight road. We go to high school, we go to college, we get our job, but some of us take that scenic route through life experiences. And so I would like for her to tell her story, and then we can have some Q&A.
Yeah, that'll be dope. Annie, so I appreciate you for having me, and thanks for your patience, because I was literally in the gym. I had just walked up from the gym when I got the reminder. So I appreciate y'all grace, because it's been a busy couple of weeks for us. But in short, most folks just call me Progress. People still believe or don't believe that my last name is really Madison. I was born with the last name Madison. My mom named me Sabrina Madison. So just in case you're wondering, I did not change my name to go along with the city. It really is Madison. And there are other folks here in the city whose last name is Madison. But I'll give you sort of like what brought me to Madison. And I think I do talk about that a lot, or not as much as I probably should, but I'm an open book. I'm very transparent. So I firmly believe in getting my questions answered. So if you have a question, I'm super okay with you interrupting me, asking me a question or to clarify something or to slow down, because the more excited I get, the quicker I do talk. But anybody on this call from Milwaukee or Chicago, the Midwest period outside of Madison, anybody else? No, everybody from Madison on this call? Everybody born in, oh, Madisonians? Okay. Cesar, who else? Did I see any other hands? Oops. Okay. See, that's why I'm a in-person person. Okay. So yeah, I grew up, oh, Rockford. Okay, Lydia, I see you, Rockford. So I grew up in Milwaukee. My dad's side of actually both sides of my family are from Chicago. I was born in '78, so from maybe I don't know. Okay, Chicago, somewhere between '79 when I was about 1 through maybe around 6 or 7. My mom moved back and forth to Chicago so many times. Like, you know, I would imagine if I look back at my school record, I might have 12 elementary schools from like that period of time, because we moved around a lot. And we moved back from Milwaukee to Chicago several times before we really got stable in Milwaukee, maybe around 86, 87. So like many folks, I grew up in a super dysfunctional household. I mean, like mad dysfunctional. There's lots of mental illness in our family. My mom and my grandmother is a diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic. So you can imagine what our life was like with her growing up. But that is my home girl. She's a ride or die. She always got your back. So growing up in a household where my grandmother had a nervous breakdown when my mom and her siblings were younger definitely affected, I believe, the outcomes for our family and the expected outcomes, especially for the men in our families. So in short, after she had a nervous breakdown when they were young, the family, you know, the siblings just kind of got really, really scattered. And my younger aunts and aunties basically had to raise themselves. My mom, she was abused. She was raped when she was younger. And because of some of the choices she made, I was kidnapped as a child. So I was kidnapped as a toddler. My uncle, who was, I think he was still in basic boot camp, he came and like really hit the streets and found me and made my mom kind of like share where I really was and where she thought I was versus, you know, not really saying anything. So that happened to me. And then because of my mom, like in her own dysfunction and what she was going through, she caused the murder of one of our great aunties. So all of these things are happening. My mom is like, you know, sometimes it's a central figure in some of this stuff, which really affected that part of the family even more so. So where we could have had this tight bond, a lot of things just started happening over their early years and my early years that led to the family being very dysfunctional. So growing up, you know, everything from going to anybody, if you got folks in prison, you know, you probably know these stories, but I have 2 uncles on my mom's side. They're both in prison. My earliest childhood memories of them are going to beg the state of Illinois not to electrocute them for crimes they've committed. So that's like my early memories of them. Both of them are still in prison. They got out for a little bit of time, but they're both back in prison. I doubt they'll ever see like freedom again out on the outside. So that's happening. Let's see. The other thing that kind of like led me where I had to like just really get out and get away and put some distance between our family is that my brothers didn't really have role models. Their role models basically were my uncles or the other like stepfathers in our families. And so when I was around 10, my dad, who was a banker, had 2 degrees. I lived in Chicago. He OD'd. He was using. I didn't ever know he was using until I read his death certificate years later. But he was using crack cocaine and passed away or overdosed when I was about 10. And then my brothers and I have different dads. Their fathers are I believe they've all passed. One has never met his father. And then the role models that they had to look up to were my uncles who were in prison. So you can imagine what my brothers are now. I have one brother doing, I think, 8 years, another who did 13. I helped him get his life together, moved him to Madison, so he's fine. Then I have another brother who did about 8 or 9 years. When I was about 15, I got pregnant. I had my son 2 weeks to my 16th birthday. And I think bringing him home into a household that was very dysfunctional. There's lots of yelling. There's lots of screaming. My brothers are already like 10, 11, 10 to teenage, and they're already catching cases at this point. So I was like, this is too much. I gotta go. I do not want to raise my kid in this. But from that period up until my son was like maybe 5th grade, I was just struggling. I was just like, trying to figure life out. I had like multiple jobs, gas stations, retail, you name it. Thankfully, I still finished school when I was 17 years old over at Washington, Milwaukee. But I was stressed out. I was like, my life consisted of visiting my son's dad in prison, my brothers in prison, uncles in prison, trying to like really stretch $20, $30 to make way. So somewhere around 4th or 5th grade for my kid, who's now 28, we moved to Waukegan so I can just like have some peace of mind, go out there with my grandmother for a couple of years. There, again, I'm coming into, the other part of our dysfunctional family who was in Waukegan or still in Waukegan at the time. And so now I'm in Waukegan dealing with their dysfunction, just a different dysfunction outside of my mom and brothers. So maybe the last year that I was in Waukegan, because I was there, I think a total of 2 to 3 years, I think I lost my job because my grandmother couldn't babysit in her senior housing overnight. So I gas station job anymore. So we were technically homeless for about 4 to 5 weeks. I was like renting those cheap motels, living in my old beat down station wagon, and just trying to figure things out. Luckily, I got into a transitional housing program, was able to set some money aside. And that was kind of like, I had to ask myself, what do I really want for my son and I going forward? And so I remember coming to Madison with anybody ever like your family tries to get together, try to get along. And we had one of those years where the women in our family were trying to get along. We come up to Madison, we walk the Capitol. I just remember thinking like, wow, the city is so clean. I don't hear any gunshots. I didn't see any broke down cars. The parks look together. And I just remember saying like, if I was going to move somewhere with my kid, I might just take us to Madison. So somewhere around 2007 or 8, we made the trek. I packed up my apartment in a U-Haul. I didn't know anybody here except for my new landlord and my new supervisor, which was, I worked at Goodwill Industries for that first year that I got here. And I'm just looking at the chat okay, I see some other folks. All right. So I get here, don't know nobody on purpose. I was like, yes, my family is at minimum 60 miles away. I ain't got to deal with their mess when I get here. When I first got here, within 2 weeks, I realized something was like absolutely wrong in this city. Something was definitely like in the air around racism, around inequities or whatever. Because not even a good 3 or 4 days I get here, I didn't understand how to get around the square. So I think it was a shared ride, a Badger cab I caught at the time. And I was like, I just want to go around the square. So once I see the cab go around it, I'll know how to drive around it. I didn't, in Milwaukee, we didn't have shared rides, I don't think, or I didn't ever catch a shared ride. I get in the shared ride. There are 2 drunk white dudes. And I'm like, y'all gonna have to stop pushing into me or whatever. And immediately, before I could even get another word out of them, they're like, go back to Chicago. I'm like, to Chicago? And I'm like, first of all, I moved here from Milwaukee. And so long story short, I made the cab driver put them out, or I was like, it's going to be a problem, call the police, and we're going to be back here scrapping. So that happened. Within a week of my new job, I'm getting trained. There's, someone's training me on how to do the job or whatever. And that person is asking me where I live. And now, you're in a new city, you don't really know where you live. You just know what street, your address, what the house looks like, and kind of maybe some landmarks. So I'm like, I just get off the belt line off Fitzpatrick Road. Immediately, the person who's training me is like, oh, you must live on Allied Drive. And in my mind, I didn't know if I lived on Allied or not, because I wasn't from here and I didn't know where Allied was. And so at the time, I was not very much a TV person. Like I really did. My son was the only one in the household for years who had a TV. I had not got into TV until I got here. So I'm in the house. I had moved his TV to the living room. I'm watching the news. And this is when I realized this is like sort of like told me like this city is wild. I'm watching the news and I hear on the news, someone says, the broadcaster says, there's like a shooting or something happened on Allied. But they say a person recently moved from Chicago had committed this crime on Allied. All the traveling all my life, I had never heard of anyone describe a crime like that, where they tell you where the person moved from. Like I had never heard that. So I was like, oh, like if you're Black and you're in Madison, you must have moved from Chicago. You must have some ties to Chicago. And you must live on Allied Drive, because how dare you not live anywhere else? How dare you not come here from somewhere else? And over again, over that next year or two, I would just hear over and over and over this connection between crime and Chicago. But I would never hear these same connections made when white folks were committing crimes or white kids were downtown tearing up the bars. I never heard someone say, hey, this kid is from Rio, Wisconsin, and they tore up the whiskey, whatever, the club is named downtown. So we got here very quickly, understood that there was some things amiss in the city around Black folks and Black folks' place in the city. I'm not sure how much Annie, I can't remember just how much Annie shared, but when I got here, I started MATC fairly quickly. MATC puts you to work right away. My first semester, I think my internship or my service learning was at Operation Fresh Start. And that put me right to work mentoring and helping folks get their GEDs. I worked for MATC for about 10 or 12 years. Somewhere around 2012, 2013, I started taking national speaking jobs and local jobs. And so what started happening is that I would travel, do a talk, maybe Atlanta or Chicago, or I don't know, Detroit or whatever. And I would get back to Madison expecting to have those diverse crowds. And I started noticing that some of the larger organizations who would book me here, who absolutely had access to Black women, were not including those Black women and other women of color in those sessions. So my last session for a large organization here in town that absolutely serves women of color, has them as employees, has them as clients, had built out a training program for women. And I come into the talk and I'm like, oh, it's going to be so lit. It's going to be women of color. I'm just getting back from Atlanta. And there were no Black women who were participants. They were all white women. And when I asked them how they found out about the opportunity, they would say normal things like, hey, my job, my colleague, my manager thought it'd be great for me. So it was at that point that I realized that I needed to quit. I wanted to quit my job. I was going to go to work for Black women. So I would go on to create what became the Sold Out Black Women's Leadership Conference. A couple months later, I quit, I think March 2016. We put that first conference on May 2016. Then I put on an expo right away. I think I did those for 2 years. Somewhere around 2017, I'm still traveling the country and I'm visiting spaces that look like me. The people who run the spaces look like me. But at the time, there was not a physical space here in Madison that was created by Black women, led by Black women, for Black women, or center Black women. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to create a place that centers us, that centers my work and allows me to focus my efforts around Black women and their families. And that's how really the Progress Center came to be. I created that with the sole intention is to center Black women around entrepreneurship, professional development, and financial health, with some social stuff and the co-working space that we have downtown. Got tons of awards, like Annie said. Probably the best one of my favorite is getting one of 100 Black woke women from Essence Magazine. I've won Best of Madison a couple of times. I've won Most Influential, I think, twice. So that is really my story. I currently chair the city's Academic Development Committee. I sit on the board for the Overture. I sit on the board for the United Way. And I sit on the mayor's task force for a guaranteed income. So that is my long 2 cents and how I got here. So I'm more than willing to answer any questions. I don't mind sharing how I protect my peace and my sanity while I'm here. So yeah, I'm open to any questions. And Annie, is there anything you feel like you wanted me to share or to note? No problem, Maxine. I'll be in your hometown.
I am multitasking. Because when you get to the wire, stuff start popping up out of everywhere. But what I like I'd like to talk about what was the supports that you had that helped you? Was it prayer? Was it external support? Was it, or was it role models? Was it mentors?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Those are the kind of things in terms of looking at resilience.
Yep. So early on, it was my son. So again, what really motivated me and continued to motivate me is not wanting my son to have the same outcomes as my brothers nor his father. And so it was looking at him, wanting him to be successful, not wanting him to end up in prison, that very much drove me early on. And what continued to drive me
so
is
we
after
have, I think, about 5 minutes. We have, these are, except for one, except for cheese, nuts and salts, they are food trucks. So there's a cupcake or what's her name? A jail.
Annie, you're not muted.
Okay.
Ooh. Okay, so yeah, so early on, it was really my son, y'all. And then after I quit my job at MATC and put on that first leadership conference, what drove me really, and then what continued to drive me, was a Black woman who attended that first conference down off of or on State Street. She stood up in the audience and she was like, I've lived in Madison, I think she said somewhere between 12 and 14 years. And she had experienced this. Now, I was happy to provide this for her, but I was also heartbroken because, you know, she had lived here that long and she had not had an experience yet where she was in a space with just some dope Black women who were delivering the content, creating the content. We had like this really beautiful vibe. And that was kind of heartbreaking for me. And so over the years, when people would say things to me like, oh, you can take this national, you can move somewhere else to do it, I always remember that person where if I left and I'm no longer doing things to serve Black women here, who would that woman have to go to? You know, like who would be the person that is creating for her needs? And so despite me planning time eventually between here and somewhere else, I'll always be here creating content because that Black woman lives with me, like regularly, she's with me. And then the other driver and motivator, it's really just, honestly, y'all, it's really my son. Like my son, he keeps me like sane. We have a really, really close relationship, like because we grew up together, literally. I don't really look to like national, like celebrity type figures. I really look more to people that I have access to. I've met Black women across the country in my travels and helping me build out the Progress Center, who I continue to go back to for advice and support. It's being able to call folks like Annie to sort of like flesh out a thought or an idea. I really look to people that I have access to motivate me or to inspire me. And at the end of the day, it's my granny who's like, I'm telling you, y'all, she carries Black Air Force One energy around her all day long. And it is my son who keep me motivated, who keep me going. And it is that woman who set up and stood up back in 2016, who drive me.
Okay. So, you know, I'm sitting here multitasking. And one of the things is that, you know, Sabrina, when I saw, you know, when I first encountered you, I always look at people who are common good. And that means people who the philosophy of their life is helping others. And so I was talking with some folks the other day, and God gave me this. My healing thing is my faith. Black women who poured into me. I have a strong support of women from Milwaukee who embraced me and supported me. I was in part of a women's group in Milwaukee. I traveled from Madison to Milwaukee because there was none here. And so then I started women's groups because those women motivated me. And so the who I am comes from, it's the part of resilience, and it's a part of really the characteristics of the African diaspora: community, faith, our ability to bounce back. And so you know, listening to you talk about that, it mirrors a lot of the things that I experienced, but I have a real strong connection to my faith, my church.
Yeah,
I've been a member. And so it was a place when I didn't know anybody, I joined a church, and most of my long-term friends in Madison are people who I met in my church. and continue to be a support for me and my kids. And so even though I had a brother here, he was a UW graduate, and then I came from Milwaukee. And so and I came with issues. And so I never really blended into his group. So I had to find my own place of where I could be who I was and then become who I am. And so since we are still waiting and maybe not waiting for Martinez, which is some glitch in terms of shifting of 2 coordinators in a short time. But I'd like to allow people to just ask questions, and you can have some dialogue, because there's things and if you can't use the camera or the mic, use the chat and I'll help read the questions. I'll pull up the chat because we got 13 folks in the chat.
I do see a question from Abby. Healing Labs is trying to form connections between teens and high school and amazing community members like Dr. Moore. Do you remember connecting to any community adults as a teen, and how did you make that connection? And so I went to just predominantly Black high school in Milwaukee called Washington High School. And I'll just say, like, teachers are very different. I think teachers are just really dope, period. But there's like being in a school where all your teachers are Black, your principals are Black, is just a whole different vibe than what my son experienced here in Madison. And so there was 2 teachers that really made an impact on me. One was Mr. McGowan. So when I was a freshman, I had graduated middle school pretty young. So I started high school I was still 13 years old my freshman year. And something happened between middle school and high school. I thought I just got to high school. You couldn't talk crazy to me. You couldn't say anything to me. And Mr. McGowan would be like, Miss Madison, I'm gonna put you out on Sherman. And so I was like, well, put me out on Sherman, And he did. He put me out on Sherman, like, because I wasn't coming to school. I was coming to school, but I was skipping. I was in the hallways. I was talking. I was getting in trouble freshman year. And I remember locking one of my science teachers in his classroom. And he put me out on Sherman for like 2 weeks. Now, being put out on Sherman, you had to go to the Boys and Girls Club for all of your education. But it was like the most ridiculous situation. You had to sit at a desk, could not talk for those 6 hours. You couldn't, you had nobody to help you with your work. And I was like, I never want to be put back out on Sherman. So from Mr. Gowan, I learned really how to live my life with intention, to have some sort of purpose about my day. So was my intention to go to school or in life to sort of screw up, to be loud, to like have no drive, no sort of like idea what was going to happen for me that day. After being put out on Sherman, you can guarantee I began to create and be intentional about my life. That's likely why I was very intentional with my son, and my son doesn't have the same background as the other men in our families. And then I had a typing teacher. I don't know if anybody had old school typewriter class. I think it was like electric typewriter, but she was like over the top in a good way. She would put like sheets of paper over our hands while we typed so we couldn't see the home keys. And so from her, I just really learned the like how to be consistent, like how to sort of like be patient and consistent with yourself, because we're not going to master everything we do well right away. But if we're patient with ourselves and consistently sort of like work hard at it, we might not ever be like the bomb at it, but we will get better in time. And then, so those 2 teachers really left a like lifelong impact on me. And then the third thing I'll say is that for anybody in any kind of work, the first work like really starts with yourself, like how you're loving yourself, because how you are loving yourself really sort of like kind of like directs how you love other people you're coming into community with. And so I discovered bell hooks at some point, somewhere around early 2000s. I discovered her body of work, and she wrote this love trilogy. One of the books, and it's all about Black people in love, but one of the books is titled All About Love. And at the time, I had never had a working definition of love. And she says 2 things in that book that really, to this day, stick with me. One, she says, love and abuse cannot coexist. That really gave me a sort of an awareness about the abuse that we were experiencing as kids. We weren't physically abused, but the abuse we were witnessing around between the adults in our families, that was not love. Like them beating each other, you know, kicking it, that was not love at all. And it allowed me to understand if I am in relationship or in community with someone and they're being sort of like mean spirited towards me, that's not like showing me love or being in community with me. That really is abuse. And those two things cannot coexist. So I tend to even to this day, I tend to, after I learn more about someone and see that they might be abusive or harmful to other people in the community, I very much disconnect from them, because that's not good for my spirit, my energy, nor that's not what I want to project to people. So being in a community with harmful people is not my thing at all, period. I don't care like who you are, how much, you know, how much you've accomplished. If you're harmful to other people, I cannot be in community with you, because I don't want to be part of abusing people with you. And then she talks about living from a love ethic. And she, you know, she gives these ingredients about what love is. So every day that I wake up, I am very intentional about going out and doing the work from a love ethic. If I'm not in a good headspace or whatever, I don't take that negative headspace I'm in out to anybody else. I get my butt on, you know, go for a walk, make me a shake or something, but I need to get it together, because it is unfair to other people for me to take some sort of negative vibe out on them, because that ain't, it's about me and it's not about them. So the best thing I can say for you all, for anybody doing any kind of work, is to sort of like get right with yourself. And we all know our own mess. Oh, the last thing I'll say is intentional prayer. If you're a prayer person, I'm not a religious person, but I very much believe in a strong prayer life. But I had to learn how to be more intentional in my praying. And when I became more intentional in my prayer life, I started to see the things I was praying for sort of come to fruition, like come alive, like literally in front of me. Where I am sitting is like because of an intentional prayer. So yeah, that's my spiel. But the two people were my high school principal and my high school typing teacher. To this day, I'm scared to walk Sherman in Milwaukee without thinking about Mr. Gowan and that freaking bat he was running around with. So
to let you know how short, I mean, how the short separation is in Milwaukee. Mr. McGowan was at my school at Parkman when I was in middle school. And so to hear that he was a principal in my son's generation, because Rocky was born in 78. So
yeah.
I said, so, you know, but then in terms of going to a school, and I can mirror that, where you had Black teachers who invested in you. But we have Black teachers who would show up at your house. If you weren't acting up and your mom didn't have a phone, they would come to your house. And so there was this accountability that we don't necessarily see today in terms of having that community around you. And so I'm a product of Milwaukee School District too, Milwaukee Public Schools. But one of the things that I want us to really look at when we talk about healing, you know, a lot of us think about, you know, oh, I'm going to heal from this, but it isn't magic. You know, sometimes we go to physical therapy and you do those exercises for that 6 weeks, and then you go back and they say, well, keep doing it. So you continue to work on that healing process, and that it becomes automatic. So I listen to you talk about prayer. I listen to you talk about things like walking, things that, you know, taking a shake, but that is that self-discovery, but that's also self-actualization. And so when we go to the doctor and they throw a pill at us and we don't take that pill after 10 days because we feel better, you know, how do we really look at healing in terms of a long-term process, that it is a daily process? And I think that's in terms of when we listen to the word, that there's things that we do to ourselves daily. We pray daily, we meditate daily, we do these things to regenerate ourselves and to reignite ourselves, and we eat daily, we should exercise daily. And so those are the proper things that, so even in the way you were talking in your narrative, I start picking up routines and practices and things that are very intentional. And when you recall your childhood, you recall it now just like a thought, but not like all of the emotions that So teaching our kids how to separate that, because that may happen to you, but it's not you. how do you shift and do those kinds of things? So in your narrative, I'm sitting here and I'm just like, wow, and you talk fast like me. So I said, okay. But one of the things that we need our community to know, particularly our young people and our families, because we have a lot of families who come from similar experiences, but they did not have somebody like a Mr. McGowan say, oh no, this is when your behavior, this is the consequences of that behavior, where you had the choice to say, I want to do better. And graduated. And even with a child, that's a hard thing as a teen mom with a child, and not having all of the resources around you. And so I'd like for people to, join in the conversation. If you want to do the chat, since somebody who can't do a camera and mic, but like Cesar, I went, yeah. So please, I'm gonna mute myself.
Hi, Sabrina. Thank you again.
Hi.
I think it's really wonderful to hear the things that make us, right, that shape us. I mean, and that's one of the things when I talked with Ms. Annie when I first met her, and just this idea of like, really someone who in essence gave me a pathway here, right, to think about and to walk. This is how we need to walk together through these things, right? And so that's what kind of like where my question goes to, because personally, my family history is from Central America and Guatemala, but because of everything, the influences of the United States and the whole history we have with the United States, and how we have not chosen to come, we were forced to come, right, here to the United States because of economic, military, all these kind of influences that the U.S. had on our communities, right? And yet when I come here, when I grew up in Chicago, seeing that, perpetual stress disorder is something that now I understand it being that, right? But we shared that with a lot of our communities, our African-American, Latino, Asian brothers and sisters who came from different diasporas, right, throughout the country, either from Asia or who actually just lived here and lived with the traumas here. I think that's one of the big lessons that I had when I was growing up. And now I understand it, right? Now I understand the influence, that it was systematic. And to hear you say that as when you first came to Chicago, when you first came to Madison, that's exactly what happened to me when I first came to Madison. This is only 5 years ago now. So it's this idea of like, oh, all those people from Chicago bringing the crime up in here. I'm like, didn't I just tell you I just recently moved up from Chicago? Do you understand? But I think, and then to share something with you, and I think what I'm kind of getting to is this idea that we have shared histories in a way, right? And we don't sometimes see that, and that's what stops us from working together. And so my question is like, how do you start building that now that we're in these different places, we're going through different paths? As a, I'm going to put it in quotes, but as adults in this, as being models for our children, how do you see that collaboration? Because it's hard here. It's tough to work with community members who look like you, who act like you. It's not easy, right? But we're committed to it. We're committed to it because some of us are left, in whatever space you're at, that's where you need to, too, right?
So for me, I'll just, growing up in Milwaukee, and likely you too, when you're from Chicago as well, we tend to not try to fit in, I guess, like we tend to not try to force things. Not to say that other people don't do it, but so I've never, again, maybe because of I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. I grew up in a community or in a school where despite the dysfunction, I really felt like my peers loved me, my teachers loved me. I felt like I had community. If we didn't have food or we were starved, my mom, our lights were cut off, we would go next door and eat, or we would go across the street and eat. We would share the electricity. You know what I mean? Like we would run cord through the little gangway so we can have lights. When I moved here, I don't know if it was, again, I don't know because I didn't grow up here. But what I will say is I'm just very committed to my authentic self. And I am okay if folks don't want to deal with me because I am not going to go up, be someone that goes along. Because it's hard for me to because I grew up in such a place where we didn't have much, and I knew there was plenty out there. You know, I cannot be part of things that seem like they are harming people who look like us. I can't be part of things where it feels like it is going against my morals and values. Or like, you know, it's just, you can tell, it's just something is not right about it. You can't pinpoint it just yet, but your gut is telling you this is not right. So I pay attention to those things. I always tell people, pay attention to the energy in a room, that the energy people bring into a space. And if you can get good at that, you will save yourself a lot of trouble. You'll save yourself a lot of harm. And no matter what room, I don't do the whole code switching thing or whatever. So whatever room I am in, I just go as myself, and I will go and advocate as much as I'm able to for people who look like me, because I know that folks who look like me are being harmed within our own communities, and then they're being harmed in white, you know, predominantly white communities. So I don't want, if I got to be the sole person, such as life, I'll be the sole person who would say what needs to be said that no one else wants to say. And so building community it's difficult. It was difficult, or it has its difficult moments. I won't say it's necessarily been difficult, because I just pay attention to people who are wanting to build with me, not wanting to take from me. And as I realize, as I get to know people for who they really are, who I thought they were somewhere else, then I disconnect myself from them. You know, I slowly like let that relationship die, because it's not positive for me and others. But, and then I do want to go back to something you were saying about like our kids. I always want to tell, especially like parents of color, you know, we grew up in households, at least for me, where, you know, you weren't supposed to be part of grown folks' business. You were not supposed to talk back. You were not supposed to question adults. And I just think about when I was if I had the ability to question my mom, like question why she was spending money on something we didn't need versus paying our light bill, for example, I just think about like, man, we could have been so, you know, we could have had different outcomes. So when I was raising my son, he'll be 28 this year. I allowed my son to question me. I allowed my son to like stretch my own thinking. I allowed my son to know how much money we had. So we went to the grocery store. We weren't going back and forth about why he couldn't get the $4 cereal. I taught him unit prices. I taught him like, you know, we got $18 and we got to do all of this stuff. So when we went to the store, he helped me make the best decisions. When we talk about like in some, for example, around LGBTQ plus issues, where my thinking was not as stretched as it should have been at one point. And it was him who, because he had friends as part of his own friend network, who I did identify in those communities, he stretched my thinking. And so it's just like allowing our kids to expand not only themselves, but to expand us is important. Otherwise, we're not setting like the next generation up to be like the community leaders that of like each other. So the best thing I can say for like young people, if you're raising young people in a community with young people, allow those young people to question you. It doesn't have to be disrespectful, nor should we assume that they're being disrespectful because they're questioning us. And the last thing I'll say is I had a teacher at MATC who was Jewish, and I think her name was Bar Malamed, something like that. But I never forget what she said about the Holocaust and how their parents and her parents' parents, after the Holocaust, one of the things that they wanted to do was never allow their kids to get in a place where they weren't questioning things and questioning their leaders and their heroes and that sort of thing. And she really taught me how to sort of like debate almost with my son to get him to explore his thinking and stretch his mind or whatever. But that like never left me. So again, allow your kids to expand your way of thinking as well, because kids are always going to be the new wave. Like they're always going to be better than us, and we should want them to be better than us, you know?
Thanks.
Yeah. Oops, let me just looking at my little time here on my phone. All right, y'all. This was good, Annie. And I gotta jump. I have an 11 o'clock. It's been busy for us. I just started an executive assistant. We are about to bring on a full-time resource strategist. And so my life has been a lot of interviewing and reference checks the last couple of days and preparing offer letters. Oop, you're muted, Annie.
I'm glad that you jumped on to have this conversation with us. And so we were supposed to have 2 folks, so that would have taken us to our next time by having a good conversation. However, we appreciate the time that you have. And so what I would like to invite the participants to do is that we can engage in some conversation in terms of what we heard, how can we apply that? Because we are developing a program to really help with healing and working with the school districts. You are doing some of the similar things. I know you got moms in the schools and things like that. And so particularly at East. So how do we as folks who have experience and folks who are connected, continue and complement or partner and collaborate so that we can look at, healing from a holistic and a multidisciplinary approach in our community. So thank you so much.
Thank y'all. Again, let those kids lead you. That is the direction to go. And especially, before I get off of here, those kids at East High School, oh my God, like the work that they do, the leadership that they're doing, especially around like gender inclusion and like protecting their bodies and oh my God, it's almost spiritual being in conversation with those kids and like the impact that they had around leadership and what they want to see happen next. Like whatever you can do to be a community with young people, do it, because they are like, I'm just proud. Like I can just cry. I'm proud of those kids. So yeah. But all right, y'all have a good rest of the day. Stay safe and stay hydrated. Stay hydrated, y'all.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So
I mean, take care of yourself.
I'm trying, but I hope that the glitch, and then I do apologize for the glitch, but like I said, I'm home dealing with long-term COVID effects. So I'm trying to do something I used to do with full throttle, and we volunteer. So trying to keep everybody on task and making sure everything goes out. And so I do appreciate, and we're going to do more of this in terms of working with our other group of folks for Coogee and the collaborative team. And so stay tuned, and we have your information so we can send stuff to you. This will be recorded and it'll be on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook, Coogee Chakalia Medicine Center for Self-Determination. So you can find you can come back and look at this and come back and take notes. And as we move forward, it'll be more things that we post up there that will be resources. And so thank you, and God bless, and keep healing. Okay. All right.